Hi, everyone. Welcome to the seventh episode of the Chorus One Podcast. This time I'm joining again since it's an Avalanche-oriented episode. We have Morgan Krupetsky from Ava Labs. We'll introduce her in a second. But I also want to introduce Alexis since this is their first time with the podcast. She's our head of BD and sales in the US. So very appropriate that she's here to also join me and Morgan in this conversation. We want to talk about how will Avalanche tokenize all the world assets, and I'm eager to get going. Morgan is the Director of Business Development, Institutional and Capital Markets at Ava Labs. And of course, we will give her a chance to introduce herself as well. Alexis, you want to quickly do a intro of yourself? Welcome to the podcast. That's first time.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I am super excited to join you, Erwin, our resident Avalanche master and master of knowledge of all things Avalanche, as well as other ecosystems, but Avalanche in particular. So this is a real honor. And Morgan, I have met you multiple times and have heard you speak, and I'm always super excited to hear your new thoughts. And your career has been super interesting, and I'd like to dig into that as well.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. Really excited to delve in.
Nice. I'd love to get started, Morgan and Erwin, if that's okay. I'd like to hear a little bit about you, Morgan, as well. Your career and where it started and how it originally touched crypto and where you eventually ended up at Ava Labs. I love that.
How I came to the dark side?
Yes, the dark side.
Sure. So before joining Ava Labs almost 2 years ago, I worked in the traditional financial services space for 12 years. All of that time was at Citi, which for in millennial terms is like infinity years. And so most of that time at Citi was spent in capital markets within the sales and trading business. Was focusing on, for the majority of my time, on FX and macro derivative sales, covering hedge funds, asset managers, and pension funds. And then the last 2 years moved over to a very different role, was chief of staff for Citi's chief compliance officer, which was a very eye-opening experience in a lot of different ways. And then for a variety of different reasons, kind of toward the end of my tenure at Citi, knew I wanted to kind of get into the digital asset space. And I think for me, it was less so kind of, discovering crypto and Bitcoin, which is what I think drew a lot of people to this space. For me, it was really kind of experiencing, exploring, and kind of discovering Ethereum and smart contract capabilities and how they could potentially be leveraged in the context of really kind of upgrading legacy financial services infrastructure and institutional workflows. So all of like the really kind of unsexy things that I kind of experienced the pain points of in my work in traditional financial services, which, by the way, I don't think is necessarily unique to where I was, but is just kind of symptomatic of the financial services industry writ large and just being in a large corporation. That's kind of really what drew me and got me really excited about exploring the space on a more kind of full-time professional basis. And, the industry, the crypto or Web3 industry isn't an industry, right? It's like many, many different industries, really runs kind of horizontally and touches a lot of different spaces, whether it's financial services or gaming or social-fi or kind of everything in between. And so, I wanted to really kind of take the time to understand how the space was, conceived, what are the different layers and different like infrastructure and parts that kind of contribute to it, and what are the different roles within it. And what I found was, in a business development capacity, particularly at Ava Labs, we're working kind of hand in hand with partners on shared and mutually beneficial medium to long-term outcomes. So that kind of concept really resonated with me. And the idea of really building and cultivating trusted advisor relationships with our partners. Again, I was really drawn to that. And then as it relates to, being at an L1, I think I have found this to be the ideal kind of transition point from, traditional financial services to the Web3 space, in that when you're at an, L1, you really see kind of how an entire ecosystem comes together, the different parts and pieces and how they fit or don't fit, and what are the gaps that need to be kind of addressed, and really kind of building and bootstrapping not just an ecosystem, but frankly, kind of broader based adoption and growth of the space, which is something that obviously we're all trying to drive forward. And so, I always tell people, I'm like, I'm drinking out of a fire hose that's on fire, because there's just so much information, this constant learning. But it's been an awesome journey, and I've really enjoyed my time here.
Morgan, that's an awesome intro. And I like that you talk specifically about, BD, but then working at an L1. And I want to kind of understand from your perspective and of your seat of what the primary ethos or genius of Avalanche. I mean, what was this L1 really designed to accomplish?
I mean, Erwin, you want to step in there?
I'm not being interviewed, so
I'm curious from both of your standpoints. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I was going to say, to that extent, obviously, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, so I'm sold, and I'm really excited about kind of what is being built. But it also, I think it's exciting for me to see other partners kind of see the light, and also kind of start touting, the Avalanche vision, which is something that I've seen personally with like our financial services partners. But at a high level, I mean, the ethos and the vision has always been, from the beginning, this network of customizable yet natively interoperable networks, scaling horizontally to really drive forward the growth and adoption of the space, really across many different verticals and many different industries. So the kind of major differentiator and kind of where it all started, from an Avalanche standpoint, is the novel consensus mechanism. I think we don't talk about it enough, but really, Avalanche has been conceived around and built around the Avalanche consensus, which is truly the third ever most novel consensus mechanism behind classical and Nakamoto. And like the so what of that, or the implication of that, is just, it's extremely fast. It enables really sub-second transaction finality, which is important in general, but particularly important when it comes to financial services use cases and high throughput use cases. So whether it's like trading FX to settling, multi-million, billion-dollar transactions between institutions, you can't leave room for error in terms of, considering, has my transaction finalized, especially when it comes to fast-moving markets, again, like FX or equities, on particularly volatile days like FOMC, and when certain data points come out, you can't have your transaction hanging there and being like, did it confirm? Is it finalized? Just given how fast and quickly certain markets move. So it's really the consensus mechanism and the innovation of the consensus mechanism that is kind of the first and foremost kind of differentiator from an Avalanche standpoint. But then all of the things that it enables from a decentralization perspective, and that the network is able to handle many validators, much more so than networks, for example, bound by classical consensus. So because Avalanche is able to kind of handle so many more validators, it is also able to kind of enable the second biggest differentiator of Avalanche, which is the concept of subnets or custom blockchains. And so, again, taking a step back, when you think about Avalanche, a lot of people, when they think about the activity on Avalanche, inherently it's the C chain. It's the smart contract EVM compatible chain that to date has the majority of the TVL on it. But when we think about what does mass adoption look like, what do we think a future looks like from an Avalanche perspective, it is really a network of many blockchains, many networks that are customized for different use cases. And we can kind of go into this in greater detail, but obviously if you're a gaming company, or if you're a financial services institution, or if you're a government entity, you're going to have very different reasons for using blockchain, and therefore very different kind of considerations and customizations that go into optimizing the performance of your application for your blockchain. So and we're starting to see this obviously with gaming companies, and we'll talk about this in financial services institutions, but importantly, these blockchains are not islands and they're not silos in and of themselves, which is what historically a lot of these instances of these like enterprise chains have been. Importantly, we have always seen and conceived of the need for these blockchains, particularly where there's like applications that are kind of complementary to each other. They need to interoperate, right? And what that means is facilitate seamless asset transfer, seamless messaging of these things kind of across blockchains in a way that from a user perspective, it's no different. And so again, I think over the past year and a half, the app chain thesis, as we see like the proliferation of like L2s and other app chains, I think the industry has come to appreciate and see the need for application specific chains. And why I'm excited is that this is always the vision for Avalanche from the beginning. So, we're not piecing together kind of a solution. It's been part of like the grand plan, the target state vision from the beginning.
Yeah. And by the way, congrats to the Avalanche community and ecosystem in general. Like we had just the upgrade in 6th of March, Durango, and we're now kind of interoperable between the C chain and subnets, right? Yeah. So I'm pretty looking forward to see the applications out of that.
I'm looking forward to it too. I mean, I think it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to obviously execute on it. And now what I'm excited to see is real companies actually leveraging it. I think part of the real value add also of having a liquidity hub, right, where all the native integrations live, whether it's Oracle and data feeds, certain stable coins or other tokens. The idea would be, for example, for any company that is building on a subnet, they don't necessarily have to go through bootstrapping and building their network from the ground up. They can leverage a lot of the native integrations that exist on the C chain and pull them in through Teleporter, which is this native interoperability protocol, and kind of get to production more quickly with their application, as opposed to having to start from scratch and building on like a blockchain in isolation.
Yeah. No, fantastic. And so moving a little bit forward on the thesis of the tokenization, right? So the mission that Avalanche, Ava Labs, Avalanche Foundation also has stated multiple times is to tokenize all the world assets. But what is your like Ava Labs vision of how this will happen? How will it unfold? Like, what are the blockers at this point? Especially that I think we are again like interoperability. The Durango update was a blocker, let's say like that. But we are moving forward. So what else is there still that we need to figure out, needs to be unblocked at this point? Both internal, but also in the broader, not only Avalanche or
perspective. Yeah. So, I mean, from an Avalanche perspective, I think, we believe that, the underlying technology is conducive for a tokenized world in terms of, again, how fast it is to finalize and trade and transact and settle. And then also obviously the customizability is such that it can be fit for purpose for a whole host of different companies, not just tokenizing assets, but facilitating the trading and transacting of those assets on chain. So that's what I would say from an Avalanche perspective. From an Ava Labs perspective, there's, the business that Ava Labs is in is creating infrastructure and tooling to really help drive forward the growth and adoption of the Avalanche blockchain. And so what that looks like, for example, is the Ava Cloud business, which creates or offers basically an entire kind of suite of blockchain tooling to really help companies, all different types of companies, get to production as quickly and efficiently and successfully as possible with subnets, such that the company or the organization building the application can focus on the actual application and their core business and their core business competencies, and kind of enabling Ava Labs via Ava Cloud to provide the infrastructure and tooling and managed services of the underlying blockchain. And so,
so a quick question about Ava Cloud, because I'm that's one thing that I actually can't shut up about it at Chorus. So is it because right now it's, if I correct me if I'm wrong, but like it essentially is now supporting these use cases on top of cloud providers like Google Cloud or AWS, and perhaps I think Alibaba Cloud is also like underlying there. Is it the plan to kind of enlarge this pool? Is it like so that essentially the customer comes in and says, I have this application, I want to deploy it and be interoperable with the C chain, all checks. Mm-hmm. Now it's also important for me, some use cases will be permission, so it's a different thing, but let's say it's a permissionless one. Like I want to also diversify, right? So it will be able to kind of select where these validators come from. Is that the plan? Or?
So it's interesting because I think Ava Cloud is a little bit of a misnomer of a name because it's not necessarily just offering like cloud services. It really provides a whole suite of like blockchain infrastructure and tooling from that perspective. So it could look like everything from RPC endpoints to block explorers to customization via stateful precompiles to validator services and kind of everything in between. And from a client's perspective, they can kind of pick and choose which ones they want to leverage Ava Cloud for, which ones they want to leverage potentially third-party service providers like Chorus One for, which ones they want to manage themselves, and kind of everything in between. So from an integration standpoint, I know the team is very much focused on ensuring that via Ava Cloud, a client can access many different third-party service providers, whether it's like from a custodial perspective, a tokenization, like whatever that is, through kind of a singular portal. And really making it, again, like as easy as possible for a client to kind of come in and ultimately down the line, not even have to like interface with a team, right? Go online and say, I want this, this, and this, and stand up their subnet on top of which they're able to build. Where we're at now, obviously it's a much higher touch process because we're just early on in the whole adoption game. But ultimately the vision should be very easy from like a click and self-service perspective.
But this is a very important clarification point. It's good for the listener to pay attention to that point. Like it's not, as I understand it, what you're saying is like it's not essentially about where these things are running and that you're like making a cloud environment, but it's about the infrastructure and like this the equipment, the software, the monitoring, the tooling, the block explorers, all of this kind of standardize it, and so that this can be kind of run wherever it's needed.
Correct. Of which, by the way, cloud is like a component. And of course, it should enable like many different options, but that I would say that's one of the many.
No, that's great. So
thinking about,
No, I was just going to say, let's go back on track then.
No. I love it too. I'm learning as well and being an active listener, but also getting to ask questions, which is super fun. So I want to get into Avalanche Vista because this is kind of where this tokenization on Avalanche begins. Is that correct? What was the beginning and the genesis of Avalanche Vista, and where are we now?
Sure. So just taking a step back, when we talk about tokenization writ large, tokenization isn't a new concept. It's been around, for a while now. And even some of our team members from an Ava Labs standpoint today had been working on tokenization in some way, shape, or form before joining Ava Labs. So it's something that I think has been, top of mind for us for a while for a variety of different reasons. But I think from a tokenization perspective, this time feels different in a certain sense, because I think one, you have a lot more like institutional and enterprise grade infrastructure in place than you did the last time tokenization was popular. I think two, we saw rates in the real world or in the macro environment going up while DeFi at a certain point was experiencing a bear market and saw a lot of kind of outflows from a AUM perspective, which prompted different projects to really see the importance of bringing real yield on chain. And so we're seeing like so many different projects launching tokenized money market funds or yield bearing stablecoins to kind of help address that. And then we're also seeing major financial services institutions, both buy and sell side, touting the future as tokenization and kind of being bought into the idea. And then finally, big companies actually doing stuff in the space, which is really exciting to see. So all of these things, I think, obviously we're still early, and Erwin, we didn't talk about blockers, which we can get into, but we're still definitely early. And I think people in the crypto space are so used to like instant gratification. Like we need, this thing to be developed and adopted yesterday, which I'm all for. But I think at the same time, from an industry perspective, we need to be realistic. We're upgrading legacy financial services infrastructure from like the 1970s. So we need to be patient. And I think it'll take a while. So we have to start with POCs, then pilots, then in production, and then like scalable businesses, but it's happening. And so one of the blockers, or probably one of the most important blockers, I think, in the space has been demand and distribution. I think in the first instance, a lot of people focused on like higher quality asset supply, because historically, from a tokenization standpoint, a lot of the asset supply or a lot of the things that were being tokenized, and frankly still are, is like not great supply. Because the idea is like, well, if you have to tap into crypto capital markets, like you probably can't get funding elsewhere. And therefore, let me try to tokenize this and have crypto natives kind of buy into it. I think over time, the asset supply that we're seeing has definitely improved and is becoming higher and higher quality. But now, who's going to buy it? And so I think that, anecdotally, what we've been seeing is interest in tokenizing like cash and cash equivalents, like uber liquid things. So a lot of stable coins, tokenized deposits, wholesale CBDCs and other things, as well as these money market funds. And the target market there, I think in the first instance, is more kind of crypto native institutions that potentially have a lot of USDC on chain or stable coins that's not bearing yields. And therefore the transition to money market fund might be like a palatable kind of first step into the tokenization space. On the other end of the liquidity spectrum, we're seeing a lot of interest, particularly among asset issuers, for the tokenization of alternative assets. So private credit, equity, real estate, and infrastructure. And the thesis there is it is among the most, or this space is among the most, or the least transparent and most operationally intensive to administer and not liquid, partially because they're private markets. And so there is just like a lack of standardization. And the idea would be, well, if you can apply blockchain / tokenization / smart contracts to a lot of the like asset administration and operational processes, you can effectively make smaller investment minimums economically viable for asset issuers to take on. Obviously within like the confines of existing laws, rules, and regulations, not saying that like anybody can buy it, but within existing securities laws, that's the thesis. And at the same time, you've had this like growing mass affluent accredited investor market in the US and globally, who historically is underinvested to alts because historically investment minimums are just too high for them to access. So that's the thesis. In terms of Vista, and one of the big blockers, again, is this demand and distribution. My view has always been that we really need to get, in order to get like real kind of broad-based adoption, particularly from an alts perspective, you need to see greater integration with traditional and Web 2 distribution channels, which is going to take a while and is like a very long-term thing. But like, I think we really need to see that to happen, plus a lot of education as it relates to like educating RIAs and other distribution channels around what are alts, how to sell alts, and so on and so forth. Vista was conceived primarily for this purpose, to actually work with partners who are issuing and working on tokenizing high quality assets to actually help to invest in the underlying assets themselves, the tokenized assets themselves minted on Avalanche. There's a lot of venture partners out there that are very focused on the RWA space from a venture investing perspective, but their mandate basically stops them short of actually, investing in the underlying, because they're not a hedge fund or a credit fund, they're a venture fund. So it's a very different risk return profile and just different mandate. So Vista was conceived as a way to actually help to buy the underlying assets that are being tokenized on Avalanche. Really would consider it, assets kind of across the liquidity spectrum and different asset types, but to join in the liquidity that a lot of these asset issuers are cultivating, and kind of helps to support from that perspective.
Yeah. So
it was a long-winded answer, but to give you context.
Yeah, I know it's a strong kind of a strong answer, because actually it ties into follow-up questions that we had. So because let's say like this first. Perhaps is to kind of exemplify a little bit, might be good to give an example of where this Avalanche Vista was instantiated. Let's say I recall an announcement about Citibank, that I think it was on the side of this very liquid and difficult to manage asset. So was this announcement from Citibank related to Avalanche Vista?
So
the experiment that was run there.
So the most recent announcement that we had with Citi, that was related to the Spruce testnet that we launched later, I guess midway through last year, which I'm happy to go into. In terms of Vista, the latest one that we announced was our support of the Republic Note, which launched, I want to say, on Avalanche in the end of or middle of November. The Republic Note is there was actually several offerings, both to accredited institutional as well as to retail investors, which basically enables, it's a tokenized asset on Avalanche. It enables investors to inherently get access to the Republic ecosystem and universe of both companies raising funds through the Republic funding portal, as well as the companies that Republic Capital, the venture capital arm, has and is and will be investing in. So it basically gives access to everyday investors to venture capital, potentially returns and returns through those raising on the Republic funding portal. And so there, I think it was the Republic Note had over 30 million subscribed to it among a whole kind of host of different types of investors. And so Vista was a contributor in that respect. In terms of looking ahead, we're doing due diligence on constantly doing due diligence on a whole host of different assets and asset types and partners. But so TBD in terms of kind of announcements there. But I would say in terms of what we look for and where we get excited is really where partners are thinking about robust demand and distribution strategies, i.e. how are they, what are they building? What kind of products and services are they building that would make it exciting for off-chain capital and off-chain users to inherently get on-chain by nature of what is being offered. So that's one thing that we really look for is people and companies who kind of think about the demand and distribution and go to market in a holistic way is one kind of big factor. And then two, we really want to, from a Vista standpoint, ensure that the allocation is joining kind of other investors as well, where the allocation is one of several investors, where at the end of the day, if it's just kind of an allocation from Vista, I don't think that necessarily sets us up to succeed, nor the partner up to succeed. It's what other investors are we joining in this broader kind of syndicated model that really, again, makes Vista a show of support as opposed to the sole source of funding.
Morgan, beyond Citigroup, there have been numerous companies, MasterCard, AWS, Citigroup, JP Morgan, Apollo, T-Pro, Rice. What is it from their perspective are you finding that and feedback that they're saying makes their projects to launch on the Avalanche blockchain so appealing?
Yeah. So I would say like generally the way that we kind of split it out is really into two buckets. One is the tech and two is the team.
Great.
So from a tech perspective, I mean, everything that we kind of went over, I think various institutions find compelling. And I think in particular, from a subnet perspective, when you talk about blockchain adoption among regulated sell-side institutions and buy-side institutions, a lot of them, particularly banks, at this point can't touch public blockchains, but want to still benefit from a lot of the innovation that's happening in that space, and kind of have connectivity in a way that kind of goes away from like the enterprise chains. And so subnets really allow institutions to really get the best of both public blockchain development and infrastructure and the native integrations and DeFi and developer innovation that's happening in that ecosystem, but still allows an institution to kind of control their end-to-end blockchain environment that meets internal and industry-wide considerations and regulations. And the kind of native interoperability that comes with Avalanche, I think institutions have also found very compelling, which is something that they can't get building on enterprise chains in silos at this point. And also gives them the optionality to open up their network if and when the regulatory environment becomes more conducive for it. To the extent any institution wants to launch on a fully public and permissionless chain, obviously that's all, like subnets can be that. And also obviously we have the C chain, which can kind of meet that need as well. So from a tech perspective, I think the malleability and customizability has also resonated with institutions. From a team perspective, there's, a good amount of us from Ava Labs that have, combined decades of experience in the traditional financial services space. And so we've built what I'd like to think are really trusted advisor relationships with our institutional partners where, when you see an announcement, it's not just an announcement for the sake of an announcement. Like it is a result of months, almost years worth of work that we've spent with our institutional partners doing hours of like tech deep dives, helping them get internal and external stakeholder buy-in, regulatory approvals, and all these things that ultimately leads up to the announcement. But then once the announcement comes out, that's just like, it's just a milestone of like much longer term partnership. Like there's a lot of institutional partners that we've worked with that we've done these POCs, we've done the reports, and they're like, okay, like what's next? Like how do we deepen this? How do we like build out and operationalize our digital asset strategy? And how can like you guys play a part in that? So it's a very, I would say, embedded partnership, and I'm very proud of cultivating as a team a lot of these relationships where again it's not a one and done, and it's a much kind of longer term thing that we get excited in terms of like helping our partners operationalize their strategies.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So and then zooming in exactly on that a little bit, like because I'm curious about two specific points here. In these conversations, right? Like they start and new partner they come, and like you said, like months of work, but you've been doing this for a while. So do you see any trends there, like things that like before conversations tended to go this way, but now they're going that way? Or like, did they change at all? Like what do you see coming up?
That's a good question. So I would say, I started at Ava Labs like 4 days before Terra. So my timing was like impeccable. And at no point when I kind of came into this role did I think the job was going to be easy. I was like, okay, it's going to take like a very long time to convince banks and there's like the merits of blockchain. And I've actually been like very pleasantly surprised by how like progressive a lot of these institutions have been, especially despite like crypto winter and like the fantastic blow-ups that we saw, the succession of blowups that we saw after that. Someone asked me once, they're like, how do you convince banks to use blockchain? And I don't have to. And that's like that. I feel like that in and of itself is a testament to how
technology,
but also like over time, how like a lot of institutions are already bought into the merits of the technology. And now the conversations have been more so about like, what is Avalanche? What are the capabilities? How does it compare and contrast with others? And then talking about, what are our business imperatives? What are our pain points? And how do we leverage blockchain and tokenization and smart contracts to enable those things? And so the conversations have become much more around like the use cases and how do we use those use cases to make the business case and get internal buy-in, and how do we operationalize them, as opposed to why do we need blockchain, which is exciting that we've seen that like evolution. And now I think it's a lot about, actually operationalizing these things and taking things to the next level, which is exciting because obviously we're ready. We're very nimble. We're ready. So it's good to see kind of institutions coming around to that.
That's really exciting. So many questions. So like one thing that also comes to mind in this regard is like, do you see also kind of a difference between jurisdiction in these conversations? Are clearly like some jurisdictions ahead of others? Which ones because you guys have a global presence, right? We see announcements from end to end of the world, what can you tell about that?
So I would say people talk about like regulatory uncertainty as like a big blocker, and just going back to the blockers, I'd say I think in some instances, because I'm focused on a lot of, tokenization, and a lot of those things that were tokenized or that are being tokenized are securities. In a certain way, it's easier because there are existing laws, rules, and regulations that govern securities. So in general, the idea is to follow them. Just because you tokenize something doesn't mean you can obfuscate those laws, rules, and regs. But the difficulty is that existing securities laws are not uniform across different jurisdictions. And so while technologically, a lot of what we're conceptualizing is possible, regulatorily, it's difficult because you can have composability across all these things from a technological perspective. Because they're securities and because they're issued in different jurisdictions, it makes it more difficult. So that's something that's like a much longer term issue that I think eventually, as adoption of this technology happens, we might actually end up seeing changes and amendments to existing laws, rules, and regs to have to like keep up with the technological capabilities. But there are definitely certain jurisdictions that are more conducive to seeing these initiatives play out sooner than later. For example, in various parts of Europe, you're able to issue securities natively on chain and use like the on chain version as like the kind of legal and regulatory kind of source of truth, as opposed to having to register necessarily with like a third party service provider who typically charges X amount. Now institutions can use blockchain as that like source of truth. And so we're seeing a lot of various initiatives throughout Europe as it relates to native on-chain issuance. Similarly, in Singapore and Hong Kong, I think a lot of asset managers are targeting those areas because there's kind of, again, like growing mass affluent individual credit investor, however you want to call it, markets out there that are, potentially would be interested in actually buying tokenized alts, for example. And obviously out of Singapore, the Monetary Authority of Singapore has Project Guardian, which is really this like umbrella initiative that lets global institutions drive forward different initiatives within, I think it's FX, within asset management, within payments. And so a lot of the initiatives that we've done with various institutions, even though they're global in nature and headquartered in the US, it's being done driven out of teams in Europe under a Singapore kind of umbrella. So it's, from an institutional standpoint, a lot of them are just trying to figure out, again, like what is the most conducive jurisdiction under which to do something in the space. And a lot of it kind of comes down to parts of Europe as well as Asia.
Asia, yeah. Okay.
So in terms of geographics, it's a little bit, it's all over depending on the jurisdiction and the rules and what you want to accomplish. But what about industry-wise? We've talked a lot about banking and financial ways in which one can utilize the Avalanche blockchain, but what about other industries as well? You mentioned in the beginning some gaming. What's going on there, or other industries that you're finding a lot of
what's not going on there?
Yeah. Well, what are some of your favorites, Morgan?
Well, it's funny, and why I laugh is because depending on who you ask about Avalanche, some people will be like, oh, it's like the institutional chain. And others are like, it's the game. So it's really interesting to see different people's perspectives. And I think it's really exciting because, again, like subnets allow different industries to kind of build on Avalanche in a way that is not mutually exclusive. And so why me and a lot of people from Ava Labs in the industry writ large are excited about just gaming, like on-chain gaming and particularly on subnets, is we've really leaned into working with kind of really high quality gaming partners who have a lot of experience building very high quality AAA rated games. And obviously these things take a very long time to develop, but these gaming companies are building games that will totally obfuscate the blockchain experience or necessity or blockers or friction from an end user perspective, and are inherently building games that will bring tens of millions of users on chain without them frankly knowing or caring that it's on blockchain. But there's all of these additional kind of utilities that they can now access as it relates to in-game asset ownership and transfer and composability and monetization and rewards that they just simply cannot access in the traditional way of doing things and using traditional rails. And so to that end, I mean, there's a lot of games on Avalanche that we're very excited about. Today, there was an announcement around one of Nexon's kind of major games migrating to an Avalanche subnet. It is, Nexon is like the biggest kind of gaming company in Korea and 11th globally. Have other AAA rated games, namely Godzilla and Shrapnel, building on Avalanche subnets as well. I mean, some of these are just like regular Xbox games, right? And users, again, like many of them hopefully won't inherently be crypto native or have touched crypto or blockchain before, but now they will because, again, there's added kind of benefits that they now get through playing these games inherently on chain. And so from like a mass adoption standpoint, I feel like gaming is the most promising most immediately. Because a lot of these games will be launching relatively imminently, and I'm excited to kind of see the proliferation of these various subnets.
Morgan, when a new game launches, are they using an already launched subnet or are they creating their own?
So most of them, I find are creating their own. But importantly, and there's some, by the way, that have launched a subnet where there's multiple games kind of being launched on that subnet. But importantly, the idea would be for the assets issued within those subnets to be able to be traded and transferred seamlessly across different subnets as well as the C chain. So for example, like if you're a gaming company and you have X millions of users and you want to attract players of another game to your subnet, maybe you can, incentivize them in a certain way that inherently lets them use
their assets over there. Yeah.
Exactly. Use the assets over there or vice versa. And so it's really, and this is why I'm excited about Teleporter, because it's really the mechanism by which this will happen. And so it's like all the things that I think when people talk about like Web3 and composability and owning your assets and using them and leveraging them in different ways, like this is a very clear path in terms of how that could potentially happen. And so even though companies are building their own chains, I don't want people to think, oh, they're isolated in their own environment. Like there's huge benefits that they will be able to distribute and to bring over, because again, like Avalanche was never conceived as like a network of like independent silos.
Yeah, makes sense. No, I'm pretty excited. I totally agree. I think like the next, let's say this essentially bull market that will come with more users, it will be a lot due to gaming. I'm betting on this.
Yeah, I think gaming, DeepIn, SocialFi, to the extent tokenization reaches kind of broader distribution, tokenization, like all of these, like frankly, this is also why I get excited about being in this space is we should be focusing on building really compelling products and services that you cannot access otherwise, and that just inherently bring the masses on chain without knowing or caring that it's on chain, which is trying to build.
It touches like this thing also, like that a lot of people are picking up now, but like it's weird to hear from someone at Chorus One, is an infrastructure company, validation service company, but like infrastructure for infrastructure's sake. Like we've been doing this forever, and like I cannot wait to actually see being used there.
Yeah. I mean, the industry, I feel like it, for a variety of reasons, is so focused on like honing and optimizing for such specific things in the underlying infrastructure space. And I'm like, what are we optimizing for? Like, if no one's actually going to build, use, does it really matter like how optimized something is?
No, it's like I have a thesis about this, but like it's, for me, it seems like that the engineering problem, you mentioned this already, like the engineering problem is actually the easiest. So a lot of times the projects come together and they work like as engineers, like with a very clear, brilliant mind and kind of focus on solving the engineering problem. But then like when you have to actually look at and say, hey, now you have to build this multi-year relationship that you guys are, for example, that you mentioned that you guys are doing, the task is so overwhelming that this ends up being postponed and gets postponed forever.
I mean, I think like historically, this space was driven forward, to your point, by engineers and devs. And I mean, obviously a very large majority of it still is, but I think you need ultimately to bring in people with experience in the respective industries in order to like translate the tech to and make it palatable and accessible for whatever company or business or industry you're ultimately trying to work with. And then also get feedback from a lot of those partners to say like, what are your pain points? What are your business imperatives? And how can the tech enable that, as opposed to, you know, being like a solution in search of a problem?
Yeah, I totally agree. So then looking forward at this, like we are now painting a scenario where there's a few industries that will be kind of adopting this technology more and more. There will be some points of contacts, like Avalanche, Ava Labs is going to be one of them to build these partnerships and kind of help bringing them on. There will be others, of course. And there will be companies like Chorus One that is running the infrastructure, right? So from my egoistic perspective, like what can we do? Where do we come in? How can we help this? How can we, how do you see us being there for this effort?
So I think like more immediately, the space needs and will continue to need ongoing education and research and high quality research. And I think I can't like overstate enough how important that is. Because I think a lot of us in this industry are so far down our rabbit hole And not only that, like within each of our specialties or our focus areas, like we're in a rabbit hole of rabbit holes. And we like take for granted that, you know, everyone's on the same page. And by no means is that the case. So I think like a continuous education and awareness of the tech and capabilities and in ways that people can understand is so important. And frankly, will like continue, like that need will continue for years to come. And so I think the more partners we can have kind of driving that forward, I think the better. And so that's a huge and more immediate component that I think is not low hanging fruit, but like more doable. And then from a validation services perspective, you know, as we see for us, and then just in general, when we talk about like app chains in general, like as we see the proliferation of that, we'll need obviously more validation services. Especially when we see the first like permissionless subnets launch or elastic subnet launch. When we have companies like big companies that see product market fit for their application from a user perspective and will want to incentivize third parties, whether it's individuals or companies or others, to validate their networks. That in my mind is like a huge kind of opportunity and support area from a Chorus One perspective. And that could be across a whole host of different industries. Maybe gaming might be like the first one. But I think, you know, as the network grows and continues to grow via the proliferation of subnets, it's only going to be just like that much more important. And I think that frankly goes from an institutional standpoint as well. We might be a few years back from that, but I think that will kind of come into play as well.
Yeah, you mean in the sense of like Chorus One as a kind of we are an European company, for example, and then like there are certain like jurisdictions preferences or something like this. Is that
from a validation perspective, I think that different companies have, well, to the extent they want their subnets to be permissioned. You know, there's a lot of certain kind of considerations around where validators are managed from geographically, you know, who the partners are, like, is it institutional grade? Is it not? What does that look like? And so that's, you know, a clear kind of path in my mind, but also from a permissionless standpoint, you know, that also I think will come into play.
For sure. We are pretty big on that as well. So.
Morgan, so you know that Chorus One as well has a venture arm and invest in a variety of projects also in the Avalanche ecosystem. And I'm curious on your end, what lesser known AVAX projects that you're paying a lot of attention to right now?
Well, so there's some of them that you can't talk about yet, obviously, but just like in general, in terms of areas of focus, obviously gaming, and that's well known, but gaming is a huge one that I would kind of continue to pay attention to. Deepen and SocialFi are also two areas that I think we're very excited about. And in particular, as it relates to bringing like the masses on chain just by nature of like a cool new product or a cool new way to kind of engage and be rewarded and basically own the merits of your effort. And then like from a tokenization space, again, like a lot of companies that are really building like novel products and services that frankly can't be accessed otherwise. So an example there would be a company called Trips that is working to effectively like tokenize creator IP rights for YouTube creators and other creators that exist on different channels, and really making this level of creator IP an institutionally investable asset class. So things like that are like truly new and novel, I get very excited about. And so, you know, our business development team is split up into 6 different verticals. Obviously, I lead the institutional vertical, but we have teams focused on DeFi, gaming, NFTs, enterprise, exchange wallets, and we're all kind of driving forward strategies and seeing companies and working with projects really across all of those different verticals. So frankly, there's something to be excited about in each of them, but I think most immediately, I think we're all very excited about gaming.
Do all L1s have as structured business development teams as Ava Labs? It sounds very organized.
This is like one of the reasons that, again, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but it's like one of the things that really resonates with me in that, like, comparing, and I can't speak to like the structure of other teams, but I think compared to some others, at least from what I've seen as I like did my research and kind of got to know Avalanche and Ava Labs, like I feel like the team is made up of this awesome mix of engineers, academics, and business people. And from a business development standpoint, has really gone about things very like thoughtfully and strategically and not throwing spaghetti at the wall. And so again, that kind of method really just resonated with me personally. And so I think, again, I'm just like very proud of the way and the approach that the team has kind of taken as it relates to business development. And we just get excited about working with partners who in turn are also excited about Avalanche and working with us, like seeing the value add that we bring from a business development perspective. And so, I think it's a new space. So it still is a new space. And so I think like we'll over the next like X amount of cycles, we'll start seeing more and more people enter the space who have like expertise in their respective fields. But, again, I'm very proud of, I think, the way the team operates and how the team is split up and how we kind of look at and conceptualize different partnerships.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds like it's very well executed. You guys have been doing a great job, especially from our end. Last question from me is, what should you've alluded to a lot of projects that are coming up, and what should we be specifically on the lookout for that you can talk about both from Ava Labs and the Avalanche Foundation?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the Durango update, which Erwin, you referenced earlier, and the mainnet launch of Teleporter, I think all of us are very excited about, because again, it's one thing to like talk about the capabilities. It's another thing to like launch something in production on mainnet and actually see developers and companies using it. So I'm very excited to see, the actual adoption of Teleporter and the various capabilities, and seeing all of the partners that have been or are launching on subnets actually utilize the capabilities of that. And then also just like down the line, very excited about certain infrastructure components, I would say. What I mean by that is, Avalanche as a network of networks is ultimately VM agnostic. Like we always talk about the fact that it's EVM compatible, which from an institutional standpoint, 99.9% of institutions are used to and want to build on EVM. So that's what we really like highlight, that whatever you've built on whatever chain, you can easily deploy an Avalanche. But ultimately, as a network, Avalanche is VM agnostic. And so I'm excited about seeing other VM-based subnets launch on Avalanche. Movement Labs, for example, is building a Move-based subnet on Avalanche. So you can like think about like Aptos as a subnet, for example. Then the engineering team deployed what's called Hyper SDK or Hyper VM to really be able to create a new VM that is optimized to facilitate tens of thousands, if not 100,000 TPS, which we're very excited about as well.
Wow.
So all of these things have been like in development for like a very long time, but it's finally exciting to be able to talk about it and actually see companies leveraging the tech in a way that was kind of always conceptualized from the beginning.
Morgan, where can our listeners of the Chorus One podcast find you and get in touch with you? What's the best way to do that?
I literally have all of the mechanisms except maybe fax, but you can reach me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. My Twitter handle is just first name, last name. Those two are probably the best. And then, my DMs and inbox and everything is always open. So happy to chat and continue the conversation that way.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was great, great talking to you.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to see you again, Morgan.
You too.